Dog nappers and engine swappers. Recently, I had the misfortune to see an episode of My Big Fat Wedding, and it reminded me of all the times I've crossed paths with them in the motor trade. Now, I'm guessing that they're like all walks of life and that there are some good and some bad. However, I couldn't say for definite, as it would seem that I've only met the bad ones during my career in the motor trade. They are the ones that seem intent on making the life of a motor trader even more miserable than it already is. Over the years, I've amassed enough content to write a whole series of books, let alone a little blog. My earliest recollection was when I was a young boy and I answered the door to what can only be described as a very scary old woman. She looked, sounded and was dressed like a witch. She was selling lucky heather and pegs. We were pretty poor at the time and my mum didn't have any spare cash to waste, so she politely refused, but the woman wouldn't take no for an answer. She set off in a rant and threatened to put a curse on us if we didn't make a purchase. Now, I get my temper from my mum, and at that point my mum lost hers, and she said to the woman, "You better hope that heather is lucky, because if it isn't, I'm going to knock your head off, so sling your hook." Long story short, I wish my mum had bought some heather, because from that day onwards, if it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have had any. Years later, I was walking my dog in the park and I came across a woman I knew. She was crying her eyes out. Unusually, it wasn't anything I'd done. She managed to hold her tears back long enough to explain what had happened. Her dog had disappeared when they heard a noise in the bushes. Her dog had run in to investigate. She heard it yelp and it never came out. My dog, Dino, could also sense something in there too and was pulling on his lead and growling. Not being one to take any chances, I picked up the biggest branch I could carry and walked into the bushes. I came to a chain link fence which separated the park from a disused industrial estate, and the sight that met me wasn't pleasant. Some people had moved on there during the night. There were caravans, lorries, scrap cars and packs of dogs wandering round. The place looked like a war zone. A short distance ahead of me was a gang of lads and one was carrying a little dog under his arm. I shouted to them and the biggest turned round and walked back. Not wishing to antagonise him and have my improvised weapon become part of my anatomy, I dropped the branch behind me. The branch was slightly smaller than the mobile phone I had in those days, so I could always whip him with the aerial if things went pear-shaped. I asked him nicely if they'd seen the lady's little dog. He said that they hadn't, but for £50, he said that they'd look all around their camp to see if it strayed on. When I pointed out that £50 was a lot of money and he wouldn't need to look very far as his mate was actually carrying the said dog under his arm, he became rather agitated and he suggested I go away in short jerky movements before my dog mysteriously disappeared too. I was feeling quite brave as there was still a 6-foot fence between us, so I told him that if he didn't give us the dog back, I'd call the police. Again, I was told to go forth and multiply. Now, I was in a football team at the time, and one of the guys that played was from the armed response squad in Preston, and he was a tough lad. He lived just around the corner from me. He wasn't a guy to be messed with at the best of times, but his demeanour was even worse, as I'd just rung and woken him up after a long shift. When I explained what had happened, he said, "Give me 2 minutes and I'll be there." He soon appeared with his Alsatian. From memory, I think it was called Satan, and we entered the camp through the hole in the fence. We were immediately surrounded by a number of guys who looked like they used their faces to chop wood. My mate was completely unperturbed. When he spoke, he just said, "I'll get straight to the point. You've got 2 minutes to bring the dog back." 2 minutes must be the timescale the police work to. He said dog because its name was actually Tinkerbell or something like that, and he thought the seriousness of the message would be diluted. Again, the big guy spoke first. "Oh, what are you going to do about it?" My mate produced his badge and said, "I'll be back in half an hour with a full investigation team and we'll check every single car, caravan, lorry and piece of scrap on here against the DVLA records and stolen property register." This must have struck a nerve because they didn't need 2 minutes to comply with his request, and we walked off the camp, returning the trembling Tinkerbell to its rightful owner. Tinkerbell soon stopped trembling, but it'd be a while before I did. It was all in a day's work for my mate. He kept his promise to the gypsies. He didn't return to the camp. Instead, he went back to bed, but only after he'd borrowed my phone to organise a search and a team to execute it. My mate had noticed an item on the camp in plain sight, which he believed to be stolen, and indeed it was. Surprisingly, amongst the other things the investigation team discovered was an old transit pickup with an engine that actually belonged to a nearly new renter van. Seemingly, they'd hired the van legitimately and swapped the engines. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.